When we think of the 5 love languages, we often think about giving to our partner what they need, or perhaps asking for what we need. But I want to talk today about receiving. Hey everyone, I'm Sonia, and on this channel, I strive to give you personal development tools and psychological strategies to live your best life and have fulfilling relationships. And I often talk about attachment styles on this channel, among other things. Today, I'm going to talk about something that I haven't mentioned much, but it's pretty widely out there. It's the 5 love languages, or rather, I'm going to frame this within the 5 love languages. It applies more broadly as well. So this is appropriate when I'm filming this because it's almost Valentine's Day, but it really applies to any time of the year. So what I'm going to talk about is how to receive, and like really putting a focus on receiving, as well as giving or seeking to share your need for what you would like to be given. And so Gary Chapman is the one who came up with the 5 love languages. And just to give you the context for the frame I'm using here, those are, let me make sure I don't forget one of them here. They are words of affirmation, receiving gifts, acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. And the idea is that that people feel loved in different ways, where they'll notice, someone's giving them attention, or they'll feel they're being loved because of something like being given a gift. But another person, might not notice that as much, because what they really notice and what makes them feel loved is something else, like physical touch. And so making these broad categories was the idea behind really helping people to start to identify this. So this can be very useful for couples to, and others, but mostly it's used for couples to understand like how a partner would want to be loved and would feel the love coming from them, and so how they can approach that in the sense of giving. So while this is important, what I want to emphasize today is the importance of receiving in the way that your partner is giving to you. So it's just flipping it around a little. And I don't want to imply at all that both aren't important, because I think it's extremely important, if your partner is not realizing your love language and you realize what it is, to share that and communicate that. And, maybe it takes them a while or they forget sometimes, and you can gently remind them. So it's good to communicate around that as well, which is the traditional way of looking at this. But I believe it's also so important to receive what your partner is offering. So if you can try to also notice and then receive it as love, when, let's say, for example, your partner would give in what's their love language and give to you. So let's say your partner really appreciates acts of service. And for a long time, that's what they do. And maybe you sort of realized that when you learned about love languages, but what you were focused on more was that you needed words of affirmation, let's say, in quality time, because it's often more than one for people. And so that was more your focus, was to communicate that that's what you needed, and sort of have your communication be around that. And perhaps then it was to on the flip side, realize that your partner likes acts of service, and just think of your own giving to them in that way. So that's all beautiful and great. But I want to encourage, because we're still going to naturally, right? We all still have our own perspectives, right? That's why we even talk about someone sort of forgetting again, or going back, even if they started to do it that way, the way that you were hoping that they would give you love. So because of that, I want to put the emphasis on, when you understand someone else's love language, to also receive when you notice that they are giving to you from their natural love language. And so that could look like, let's say that it is that partner who appreciates acts of service and also does acts of service as their way of giving love. Doesn't mean you stop asking for words of affirmation or quality time, but can you pay attention to when they are giving you an act of service, and go like ping, ping, ping in your brain and say, oh, this is so meaningful to them, because this is how they show love most naturally to them. And so it's really about understanding that and receiving, because I guess there's a few foundational things I want to say here. So one is that giving and receiving, it's really those flip sides of the coin, and it's a two-way street, and it's really important. Similarly, receiving from our partners is a way of also understanding them and contributing to the relationship. Again, not to leave out asking for what we need and what we understand about ourselves, but bringing that in for the wholeness of the whole situation, which, especially if we're just coming to understanding our own needs and on our own personal development journey, can, not be upfront at the beginning, right? Because maybe we were used to not asking for what we needed and only having them give to us that way. And so we weren't receiving because it was this mismatch of what we actually needed. But as you're coming to wholeness and a much more fulfilling relationship, really it can be about both. So it really loops back in that natural part of what your partner was originally doing as well. I think a parallel example just within gift giving itself here could be when someone gives us a gift that's what they would like. I feel like that's sort of how we give gifts, actually. Like, I think we often try to think, what would the other person want? What do they most like? What are they interested in? That kind of thing. But then sometimes if we're really not sure, or if we just feel like we want to share something that we found useful or helpful, we'll give something that we really like, right? And it's not mindless. It may be most poignant to give what we see matches them really well. But to give of ourselves and our own perspective also does take some thought and care, right? Rather than just grabbing the first thing we see or something that doesn't really have any thought to it. So I think that can be a good parallel. And then I'll just add as one more foundational principle that the Gottmans, you probably heard about the Gottmans, who've done a lot of work on couples and relationships and long-term relationships. They have this concept of a bid, which is it's often in the context just of giving your partner some attention. Like maybe you ask them a question and it would be like rejecting the bid if you're kind of busy and you don't really respond to them, or you just respond quickly and don't really get into the conversation, for example, right? We're all going to do some of the time where we don't accept a bid, but they showed how important it is to have, I can't remember the exact, if it was 5-1, that might be the positive, negative interactions thing. But anyway, the point was that it was important to accept a lot of your partner's bids because that's what they're offering to you. And so I think it's similar in this way. If they're offering to you from their particular love language, that is still a bid. And so it's important to receive that as well. So I hope this was helpful. I think it's a wonderful way, like I said, to bring things into sort of fullness and really a very even give and take. I think often on this kind of personal development journey, because one person is likely more, doing the actual work and studying than the other, it can feel like it gets a lot of attention just in one direction and towards one's own needs and starting to understand things and pull that together. But I think then bringing in this wholeness of the naturalness of how each of us comes from our own perspective, our own ideas of how we feel and accept and receive love and what we think that is. Once we start to pull all that together and both people can be part of that, their own naturalness of how that started, even with changes that are made and much better communication and understandings being mixed in there, I think that's when the most fulfilling relationships happen.